Welcome to another episode of the Book Nook Show. My name is Kyle Colley, and this is a special episode of Creators Talk Podcast, a podcast for book conversations with your favorite bookish content creators. This episode is brought to you by Bookem, the book community's new and best way to host dynamic online book clubs. Download the app today and start your book club at www.bookemapp.com. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. My guest today is the marvelous M&M Books, also known as Maya. Maya is a bookish content creator, and she's an avid reader. She specializes in South Asian authors and romance, fiction, and more. Maya is a book advocate. She's an enthusiast. She's a reviewer, and her content is sure to make you smile and laugh. Maya, welcome to the Creators Talk Podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, it's awesome. I always enjoy your content. It's always unique and it brings a lot of bookish content. I'm having conversations out. So I kind of wanted to start a little bit about your childhood. Like, what books kind of do you remember reading and how did they impact you when you're growing up?
Yeah, sure. So I think growing up, I was a big fantasy reader. I remember in elementary school, I loved the Magic Treehouse books and this idea of being transported to a new place. I also really loved the Boxcar Children. Those are books about like these siblings and their parents, I think, passed away and they were forced to go live with their grandfather, but they were scared that he would be mean. So they found this boxcar in the woods and they would just eat like bread and cheese and scavenge. And I just thought that was like so fun. I was like, oh, I want to live in a boxcar, with just like ignoring that these kids are basically homeless. So I was like, it's fine. Like that seems so fun.
Yeah, just normal book life.
Just normal book life
Boxcar.
things.
That's good. So like, would you consider yourself always a reader growing up, or did it take time to get into books, or how is that for you?
Oh, I think I always loved to read. I think even when I was really, really little, like I learned to talk at a very young age. My mom was like, "Oh my gosh, how do we get this kid to stop talking?" And so my parents gave me a lot of books. My first couple of years, I went to like a Montessori school, and the way that those schools are structured is they give you a lot of time to kind of do whatever you want. And basically, like from the beginning of the day, when my mom would drop me off until the end of the day, like I would just be sitting in like their reading corner, like going through all of their books. And I remember them like always me asking them to always order the latest Magic Treehouse book or Boxcar Children or like any one of those popular books. And then all through elementary school, I spent so much time just in the library. I remember I always knew my school librarian by like the second week of school because I was there so much and they were like, oh my gosh, like she's back checking out like so many books every week. So definitely like my school librarians had definitely played a huge part in my love of reading, but also like my parents for sure.
No, it's great to hear. And then how are you able to keep that passion for reading? Because I know sometimes when you go through high school, you got all these textbooks you got to read now, and then college comes. So like, how were you, especially now that you're a content creator on in the book space, how were you able to keep your passion for reading during those different times?
Well, I think it's definitely hard to juggle so many different things, especially with like extracurriculars. Like I was a competitive swimmer. I did like other organizations. I was like learning another language. Um, and so like to juggle all of that, I think is really difficult. But what helped me a lot through all of middle school and high school, I grew up in Georgia and they have a Georgia Reading Bowl every year. And it was definitely kind of nerdy. It was like math quiz bowl, but for books. And they give you 20 books to read each year. You like divide up the books and you go to competitions where they ask you questions. And it's named after a librarian, Helen Ruffin, who grew up in the Atlanta metro area. So a lot of the schools are Atlanta metro area schools. But like obviously there are schools all throughout Georgia who participate in the competition. And there's all kinds of different levels too. There's like a county level, a regional level, and it went all the way up to the state level. But I think that was a really fun way to continue reading throughout the school year and also challenge reading comprehension because I think as I got older, it got easier for me to just skim books and not really understand the messaging of what they were trying to say. But I was really fortunate to have such incredible teachers, and librarians again who would really help me think about what the content of the book was saying and what the message of the book was. And that was just so helpful when it came time to write essays or be able to speak eloquently or, even join things or be a leader in organizations or participate in activities like speech and debate. Like I think reading helped with all of that and everything just ended up being really connected during my high school and college experiences.
That's awesome. And then just like that, the ability to have that competition through like, something that pushes you to continue to read no matter how like what how life give kind of takes its course, right? So then how did that kind of go into you being like a content creator? Like what kind of first sparked you to say, hey, I'm gonna start posting book content online and kind of your experience there?
Yeah, I actually had no idea BookTok was the thing at all. I remember making a TikTok account my senior year of high school and just like doing all the silly dances with my friends. So I was like, oh, TikTok is just like doing for dances and things. And then during the pandemic, when the pandemic hit, I actually spent my first year of college. I went to Florida State University. And that was during the height of the pandemic. And I was like, I am not going to Florida. Like that would be crazy. So I ended up staying home, doing all my classes online, and I started seeing more and more of these book videos. So I was like, okay, like maybe I can try posting these book videos because I was seeing just like the same books being talked about again and again. And throughout this competition that I did in Georgia in high school, they would always pick a really diverse range of books, and a lot of the authors in Georgia are really like authors who aren't, white and straight and blonde like Sarah J. Maas. Like we had Becky Albertalli who was writing like awesome queer books and breaking boundaries there. We had like Angie Thomas and Nick Stone who were writing like really awesome books about like Black kids breaking barriers and like doing things outside of the norm that were not like based in stereotypes. And so, like, those were the kinds of books that I was reading, but I wasn't seeing those kinds of books being talked about online. And I was really confused because, those are award-winning books. Like, why are people not talking about those and recommending those books? Especially because a lot of the recommendations seem to be geared towards high schoolers and middle schoolers, and they were just filled with things that I was like, are we sure we should be giving that book filled with that kind of stuff to a high schooler? Like, I don't know. So that's kind of what started it of me being like, wait, I think we need to take a step back here and like really think about what we're recommending and who we're recommending it to on the internet.
Yeah, I think that's really smart. And have you seen it? How have you seen things develop as like a content creator? Because you said when you first came in, you didn't see that as much, and now that you've kind of carved that space for yourself, do you still see a grow? Now, do you see it growing a lot more? Like the type of books that you're seeing, like whether it's like a Nick Stone, like you mentioned, or Angie Thomas, or some of the other authors that you kind of highlight on your platform. Have you seen that expand in the book space?
I think yes and no. I think when I first started, there was a huge group of book talkers and bookstagrammers who are really well established into only reading one genre of books. And I think then there was this huge push, we should read more diversely. That was when a lot of those studies were coming out from We Need Diverse Books, the organization that was founded. I think it was founded in 2015 or 2016, but basically a group of diverse authors came together. They have a board, it's like a nonprofit, and they run these studies about what the baseline is in publishing of who's writing stories and what kind of stories are getting published. And there was a study that came out about how like 90% of books that were published in a certain year, I think it was in the late 20 teens, like either in 2017, 2018, about how like 90% of these books were being published by white authors and how that had gone down, but not nearly enough in the last couple of years. And I think now it's at something like 66 or 70%. Um, so when those studies were coming out, people were like, "Oh my gosh, this is crazy! Like, how is this happening?" And they were looking at the books they were reading, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, 90% of the books I'm reading are by white authors." And that was like a wake up call for a lot of people and a way to think, okay, like now let me try to actively diversify my reading. But of course, that also brought up conversations of like, oh, well, if I have to seek out books by authors of color, like I just look at the cover and think that it's a pretty cover and that's why I read. Like I don't care about the race of the person who I'm reading. But I think if you don't actively seek out and actively try to diversify your bookshelf and what you're reading, then you are going to just fall into these patterns of reading white author after white author after white author, because like that's what's marketed to us and that's what's pushed. That's where a lot of the marketing dollars are going, where what that's a lot of what's being published. Like it's still 70% of being published. So if you just, blindly picking things, you have a 7 out of 10 chance of picking a book by a white author. But if you are more like mindful about it and you continuously go to pick those 3 books that are not by white authors, I think you open yourself up to like a whole swath of new perspectives and things like that. And I think that's something BookTok is still struggling to grasp, even all these years later. Like I think now it's been like 4 or 5 years that I've been in this space. And I think people are still grasping with it and still don't really understand why it's important to really think about who you're picking like your books from and who you're getting your recommendations from, and how that impacts, what kind of stories you're reading, and who you think, the main character is allowed to look like.
No, you said a really good point. Like, talk to me a little bit about like being a mindful like consumer in the book space, like, for lack of better terms, because I think there's uh, everything you said is it makes a lot of sense, and then I think there's also the side of people that's kind of the, oh, my algorithm just spits out these type of authors no matter what. Like, so talk to me about how, as a maybe consumer or creator, you kind of think about like, hey, this is how I actively go look for creators like Maya. This is how I actively go look for creators in a different space. Like, how do you kind of think about that?
For sure. Yeah, I think it's difficult in like the age of social media to just kind of blame it on the algorithm, because the algorithm is just going to spit back whatever you want. Like if I go looking for South Asian book recommendations, I'm going to start being shown South Asian book recommendations. But the problem is, I think that, what society deems as the norm and the majority of what's being published right now by, white straight authors is that if you just search book recommendations, that's what's going to come up. Like I think if you just search BookTok, A Court of Thorns and Roses, and The Cruel Prince, and all these books that have been around and published in 2016 are going to show up. But new exciting books by authors of color like Kaiki by Vaishnavi Patel or Legendborn by Tracy Dion, those books aren't going to come up as much when you just search book recommendations. For those, you have to search, Indian mythology book recommendations, or you have to search Black girl book recommendations. And it's like, why do you have to put those qualifiers? Like, are those not books? But I think if you want to read more diversely, you unfortunately have to start putting those qualifiers. And one thing I do is I've curated a really great community of other book talkers around me. And then when there's someone new who enters the space, who maybe starts off reading a lot of these white authors and is expressing some kind of disappointment, why is BookTok always recommending the same 5 books? Oh, it's because you haven't found this person yet who's recommending the niche that you want. And I think it's really, really important to find people in your niche. I know I love to read fantasy by authors of color that's based in like historical context. Like one of my favorite books is A Song of Wraiths and Ruin by Roseanne Brown. And it's like very heavily inspired by Nigerian pre-colonial society, which is really interesting to me. And so like I really love how much inspiration she took from those books and how it's rooted in historical context. So, you can't like just look that up and find A Song of Wraiths and Ruin. But if you search like Black fantasy or historical fantasy, you'll be able to find those books more often. So I think that that's a couple of ways that people can find books like that. But I think it's really unfortunate that you just can't search fantasy and have those books come up. And when you search fantasy, it's just going to be books of like quote unquote what the norm is.
That's well said. And you said another good point, because I think a lot of times when content creators get into the space too, it's that I want to be a part of the conversation mentality too. Whereas I don't want to have the fear of missing out on reading Emily Henry because that's where the puck's going, right? Or if it's a romance book, I don't want to miss out on missing on reading Hannah Grace. But like, talk to us a little bit about that too. Like, how do you feel as a content creator? Have you just got to a point where you're like, I really don't care, I'm gonna read what I want? Or do you still feel the need to sometimes keep up with some of the most trendy books as well?
Oh, absolutely. I always want to know what the hype is. I think I do have some friends who are like, I would just don't want to read Emily Henry. Like her books don't interest me, but I love Emily
Yeah.
Henry. I love Carly Fortune. I've read all of the A Court of Thorns and Roses books. I personally didn't enjoy those, but I feel like if I did, it would be no big deal. I think some people take it the wrong way when you say, "Hey, I think we need to diversify our bookshelves and we need to read books." They think that means, oh, then you hate white authors. You think that those books aren't worthy of all the awards. No, that's not what we're saying at all. That's not what I'm saying at all. I enjoy Emily Henry so much. I love her. I think she's awesome. Or even Hannah Grace. I read the Icebreaker series. I read her new book, Daydream. I thought there were some really, really fun aspects of both those books. Like I'm here for the hockey romances and all of that. But I also have to ask the question, like, why is the hockey player always just like a white 6 foot tall man? Like, why is there no one else? And I liked how in Daydream, how Hannah Grace like took a shot at writing someone who wasn't, a white man, or a female main character who wasn't stick thin. Like that is something that's really refreshing. And I think that when you put pressure on these white mainstream authors, they might say, oh, like this is good pressure to diversify, to support other authors. Like I think it's really awesome that Yulin Kwong, who wrote How to End a Love Story, um, is really like, I feel like she's a romance author, and she's actually also the producer of Emily Henry's book to movie adaptations. So it's like I just love to see authors supporting each other, and like I'm gonna support all of them. Like I love seeing how Ali Hazelwood loves to lift up other authors of color. Like she does tons of events with authors of color. And people are always like, oh, like Ali Hazelwood's books are like so white, they're so blah blah, they're so Raylo. She always writes the same thing. And I'm like, okay, well, she came out writing like a werewolf vampire romance. Tell me how that is back to Raylo, you know? So I was like, she's showing she has range. She supports other authors of color. Like, I have no problem with like white women killing it in the romance and all other genre spaces. I think the moment it becomes a problem is when you just don't support other authors of color and you choose to just be blind and say, I don't see all these problems within the publishing industry. I don't see why I should talk to authors of color and support authors of color. It becomes a problem when every single event you do is just with another white woman, and every single book you blurb is just another book by a white woman, and you've kind of trapped yourself then, right? Like you're in this ecosystem of whiteness and you don't ever get out of that. So you don't end up seeing the problems or seeing any of the difficulties that authors of color face in this space. So I think there are a lot of echo chambers like that in the publishing world, within book events, within bookish creator like friend groups. But and I think it's really common to see that. But I think it's awesome when you have white authors who are mainstream who recognize those problems and point those out.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think content creators are starting to really realize the power that they have when it comes to what books get produced. Because you even see it with romantasy becoming a really big genre now, right? Like 3, 4 years ago, that was it had obviously there's stories there, but then you have something like Fourth Wing come out that completely changes how people think
Completely
about
change the
that
game.
series, right? And I think, and same with the hockey genre, like that's becoming sports romance has become very big. And so content creators, when we make content and we put things out, it's not just like, oh, it reached 20,000 people. It's these publishers go like, huh, that's where the puck's going. We need to go make that book. So to your point, when you support different, it's not even about like, oh, not don't read this book or that book, but it's like, hey, when you support these books, now Legend Born gets that fourth, fifth book that's coming out, right? That's what happens. Or like a book like Slay comes out, and now we support that book. I think there's an opportunity, like you're saying, to do both of that. So I like what a lot of what you're saying there.
For sure.
Yeah, talk to me a little bit about like your creative process when it comes to like, all right, I'm about to make a video. Like, how do you think about capturing videos and doing book video?
Yeah, I really try to think about what I've read lately and what I really liked about my books, what I didn't like about the books that I read. Um I honestly spend so much time on TikTok, so I really do keep up with like the trends and what kind of audios are going on, what kind of reviews. I try to do kind of fun things with some of the books that I read, like for some of the books, if they have a fun cover or something, like doing a cover recreation or something like that. I think that's really fun. The last couple of years for Navratri, which is a Hindu holiday, which goes on for 9 days, I've done 9 different outfits, like Indian outfits with books by Indian and South Asian authors, and then like a little mini series for that. So I just try to have fun with it. I know people sometimes have like a theme or a process where they like dedicate specific time to it. For me, whenever I get time, I'm like, okay, let's sit down and record a couple videos. When I've read like 5 or 6 books that I've really liked, I'm like, okay, let me talk about all 5 or 6 of these and just do some mini reviews. Um, Same with the pictures. I'm like, okay, lighting is really great today. It's such a sunny day. Let me take some pictures of my books. There's not really that much of a process to it. And I think sometimes the best content is like when you're just, lying around and you get a really great idea and you're like, okay, let me go film this and post this right now. I think that's sometimes the content that is the best.
Yeah, and have you always been like comfortable in front of the camera as a content creator, or did that have to be a skill you developed?
Well, honestly, growing up, my family would always be taking pictures. Like wherever we went, it was like, okay, we all have to take a picture. So I just got used to being on camera. Not as much talking on camera. I think I wasn't really comfortable with doing these talking sort of videos until the last year or so. But I think I recognized that that was the direction that TikTok and BookTok was heading in. So I was like, if I don't get on the train, then I'm going to be left behind. And I was worried about editing videos, just listening to my voice for, 3 or 4 minutes, but I'm like, this is what everybody's doing. They're just sitting there talking about bugs. And I do this with my friends all the time. So I don't know why I couldn't do it to a camera,
Yeah, it's gotten to that point where it's like as a content creator, you just kind of have to do it. Like you, even if you don't not super, if you don't love being in front of the camera, or you don't like the way your voice sounds, like you just to get your message out there or just have fun. Eventually, you just kind of have to be put yourself out there. So like when it comes to like, have you ever post? How do you do when? How do you think about when you like have to post something that's made you feel nervous? Like, were you grateful that you ended up posting it, or like was there a piece of content you're like that was a little tough to post?
I don't think that I ever am nervous to post anything, but I think I sometimes am nervous to film something. And like my biggest frustrations are when I want something to turn out a certain way, and I'm like on my fifth round of filming it. I'm like sweating. I have like 12 books in my hands. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I just want to get the intro right. I just want to, get all the transitions right of like this book to the next book and not have like 20 seconds in between where I'm stumbling trying to find the right book I want. I think that those are the times when I don't think I necessarily get nervous, but more frustrated when I'm recording something for the fourth time. And of course, like nobody knows you're recording it for the fourth time, so it has to look like you're doing it for the first time. So I think those are the hardest. Or the times when I've gotten like really upset is when you record a whole video and then TikTok just like poofs the whole video. Like you go to edit it and then it's just gone. You're like, where did it go? Like I got like a really fun PR box from Epic Reads for not about a boy. I think that's what the book was called. And it had like so much fun stuff in the PR box. There was like this huge scrunchie, like this hair tie as big as my head. And I was like, this is so fun to unbox. And the whole video was just gone. And I was like, oh, I really was so excited to talk about this book and be like, look at this cute scrunchie, like this is so fun. And then it was just gone. So I was like, okay, well now I have nothing to post about this. Like I have all the stuff, like the box, there's like boxes and stuff everywhere, and there was like nothing to show for it. So that was upsetting.
Yeah, so how do you like approach community? Because that's one of the things we talk a lot about on this podcast is like how do you approach a community, engaging with your followers? When you think about that, how do you engage that there?
Yeah. Um, I think that's definitely hard to do when you don't have like direct relationships with anybody. Like I think social media is very much like a parasocial relationship where you're putting stuff out there, but you're not so much thinking about, or at least I don't really think so much about like who's gonna see this and what are they gonna think. I think a lot of it is like, can I look back on this and enjoy this? I think a lot of it is like, what kind of book recommendations would I have wanted, and how would I, what would convince me to read a book? And that's the content I really think about putting out. I think community wise, I've honestly had a really fun time meeting other people in the book space, meeting people who have maybe seen my content before and are like, oh, I know you from like the South Asian book recommendations you do. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's so exciting. And it's so fun to just chat with people about what kind of books they've read, if they've read any of the books that I've recommended, any books they would recommend me. I really love that about the community. And I know it seems like the internet is such a big place, but I think the South Asian reader niche is small enough that even just in the places that I've gone, like I've been able to meet other South Asian content creators or even just like other people who might have seen me on TikTok or Instagram or something and are like, oh, like I know you recommend books. And I'm like, oh yeah, I do. So that's really exciting and really fun to have this like community out there. And I think when I'm online, like I feel like it's hard to imagine followers or like other people as real people.
Yeah.
So then when you're meeting people in real life, you're like, whoa, this is so surreal and crazy that there are real people who are reading the books and going to the library and going to the bookstore and getting the book that I recommended them. Like I think I just don't think about that. It just doesn't seem real to me.
Yeah, and it's like speaking of those like creator meetups and just having like meeting your friends in real life. Like, how was it like meeting some of those like online friends in person? Can you share a little bit about like your experience with? I think you went to Shelf in the city too, right? Like
I
all that.
did,
So
yeah.
like, how was that? Just like you see all these content creators, and then you're like, okay, now we're together and we're creating content together. Like, how was that experience?
That was so much fun. I had such a good time. It was honestly, I don't know how much people have shared about kind of like the behind the scenes, but none of us knew who else was going. And it was just like this email that we got just had like a photo attachment of the invitation. And it literally was, I was like, is this like a scam? Like, why is there just like this photo you had to download and open? And it was like, you're invited. And I was like, what is this? Like, I had no idea what it was. And they were like, RSVP by this date. And I was like, sure, RSVP, why not? And then it really hit me when I was like, when I landed in New York, and there was like a chauffeur, and they had everybody get chauffeurs, and they had like your name on an iPad, and it was like, oh, we're here to pick you up and take you to shop in the city. And I remember like getting to the hotel lobby and like seeing other bookish content creators and just being like, wow, this is crazy that like I'm meeting people who I've only ever seen on the screen in real life. And it was honestly really fun for me to meet Hannah, who was formerly the paperback bruncher, but is now Hannah Lisa Lore. Because we had been mutuals for probably like 2 or 3 years, like I'd seen her forever, or even the Roomies Digest, Monique and Christine, who I had probably since like the first couple of weeks of me being on BookTok, like we were mutuals. Or even Kimmy's books. Like it was so
Awesome.
crazy to meet all these people from like all over the internet and to meet them in person. And it was so like wild. I was like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe that you're actually like real and we just get to hang out and have fun. Of course, everybody was so nice. There was no drama. I know people always say like BookTok drama, but just the people they invited on that trip, there was no drama at all. And not only did I get to see so many old friends who I'd seen forever, like I'd literally known Eamon for like years. Before Eamon was super famous, I was like, I knew Eamon. She was so nice. Like Eamon was always famous, but when she was like smaller famous, when she was only at 250K instead of like a million or whatever she's at now. Um, but that was so fun. But I also got to meet so many new friends too, like What's Up Cece, Sierra, and she's also based in North Carolina. And I was like, that's awesome. Or Brock from Brock's Gay Bookshelf, he's based in North Carolina too. And I was like, no way, like this is so exciting to meet other creators in my state who I never even knew like had this bookish platform. They're recommending all these awesome books. So that was just, it was just so exciting. And I think Epic Reads did such an incredible job at like planning the weekend and being so like awesome about who they invited. There was such a great selection of creators from small to big, like all different kinds of backgrounds. They recommended all different kinds of books. Like honestly, I don't think me and Hannah from Hannah Lisa Laura like read similar books very much at the time. Like she reads a lot of contemporary fiction, and I read a lot of like YA fantasy, romance, things like that. Like I like to see, what's popular, but also like what's this random niche South Asian mythological fantasy that's happening right now. And so we read very different genres, but it was so fun to connect and just be like, oh, you should read this book that I normally read. Oh, you no, Hannah, you should read this book that I normally read. And that was just so fun. It was just so cool to connect with people who were different in many ways, but we all had one thing in common. That was just we loved books and we were just so happy to be there that weekend.
No, I love it. I think we need way more content creator meetups in the book space just because it again it's you see each other on screen all the time and you're just mutual like respect for like because it's kind of it's you gotta do a lot. You're reading books, you're promoting, you're doing everything. So when you have those chances to see each other in real life, like even if it's like those book fairs, like I there's been a couple book fairs I've gone to and got to meet content creators in real space, and it's just like really cool to see them in there, just like they're different elements. And then that expands into later on when you're actually like, okay, we might do a podcast together, or we might do a content. There's like opportunities for different collaborations that end up happening because of those situations.
For sure. Yeah, I think that was another big part of it was it was just exciting to meet in person because then you got to see what people's personalities were like and what other projects they worked on that you would never have known if you hadn't met them in person.
Yeah. And then last thing on the content creation side, like because we're talking about community and collaboration and all that, like when you do have a moment where your video goes viral and it goes in, because you know how it works, it goes into a different audience. Like, how do you kind of handle like reaching new audience that don't know your content? They just kind of start attacking. Like, how do you kind of handle some of that part of being a content creator?
For sure. I think it's definitely helpful to reply to one of those comments. That's what I usually do. I just hit the reply button. We'll just talk to the camera and say, hey, I saw this comment and here's what I think about this. Like I've definitely gotten the comment that's like, oh, why do I need to diversify my bookshelf if, these are the books I'm being recommended? And I'll, probably tell them the same thing I told you earlier. That's like, well, sometimes you might be fed the same content again and again, but you need to go outside of that and try to look for diverse book recommendations. Otherwise, the industry is always going to say the same. So you can't say why are there not more, books by XYZ demographic being published while also not making an effort yourself, right? Because the publishers are going to meet the demands of what the consumer demands, right? So if the consumer doesn't demand better from the publishing industry, it's just not going to change. And you can't put that on the publishing industry that they're not changing. Because at the end of the day, it's a business and they're going to do whatever the consumers want, right? So that's like the most basic way that I can explain to people, and most people Like I think 90% of people are like, oh yeah, that's fair, that makes sense. And if they're new, like that's such a simple way to break it down that can be applied to anything. It's not just about books, that can apply to any industry, you know. Why are people not buying blue water bottles? Oh, there's not demand for blue water bottles. You know, you can go ahead and apply that to literally anything. It doesn't have to be about books specifically. So I think something like that is helpful for a new audience. It also brings people in. Like I don't think it's helpful to reply to a comment and start yelling at somebody and being like, you just don't know, blah, blah, what's going on about this. And you need to do this and read that. And you shouldn't read, you know, things from this person because they're problematic. I just don't think that's helpful discourse. And like that, I just don't think that's a great way of bringing people in. And I think book talk should be a place where we want people to learn and we want to bring more people and get more people into reading. Even if they might not be reading what we think is the right book. So they might be reading problematic books. Like a lot of people just don't know. And so just being like, hey, you know, you should go ahead and Google this thing about this person. And then if you like this type of fantasy book, read this type of fantasy book that's very, very similar, but the author hasn't said all these harmful things about this group of people, you know?
I think that makes a lot of sense. You kind of stitch it, you make a video, you kind of educate from what the response they say, and then it gives your audience, who's like your core members who understand what you're saying, a deeper understanding of how you see the world. The new people that come in, they say, okay, I might have misinterpreted how she said this thing or thought about that. I became a fan of her because the way she had the tact, or, you know, lack of a better word, for addressing what I had to say. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think a lot of content creators can relate to that.
I hope so. Yeah, I think definitely a lot of people have faced the same type of comments over and over about, you know, XYZ. And so I do think at some point it's like, okay, you get tired of explaining. It's like, okay, go see the video I made last week when you commented the same thing. But even if it's not the person who commented who understands what it is, I think a lot of the people who watch it, who are new viewers, might understand that too. And they might say, okay, that I won't comment this again on the same video next week, right? Because it's not productive.
Yeah, I want to get into you as a reader as we kind of wrap towards the end. But I also want to know, like, what are some like future goals as a content creator you have? Like any projects you're excited to explore in the new space?
I don't think there's any projects coming up that I am currently working on. Um, I do think I'm just excited to keep reading and for a lot of the new releases coming out in the next couple of months. Um, yeah, I just feel like, yeah, I'm just excited for everything coming up. There's some fun book festivals. I'm going to try to go to Y'all Fest this year in Charleston and hopefully get to meet some people there and talk about books and talk to authors. In a couple weeks, there's the Bookmarks Book Fest in North Carolina. So I'm hoping to get to meet some more North Carolina book creators there. Gonna get to see Sabaa Tahir, the author of the Ember and the
Mhm.
Ashes series, one of my favorite authors. So that'll be really exciting. But yeah, those are just some upcoming events for me.
Perfect. Let's get into you as a reader. What's the last book you read? What are you planning to, or what are you reading now, and what do you plan to read next?
Okay, let me pull up my doc because I never remember. Someone's like, "What are you reading?" I'm like, "I
I
don't know."
know it's the life of a reader, isn't it?
Okay, let's see. What have I recently read? Okay, I read The Blighted Stars by Megan O'Keefe, and it was a really fun, fast-paced sci-fi, part of I think a three-book series. And I already got book two because I really liked it. I'm currently reading Jade City, which a ton of my friends have hyped up. It's by Fonda Lee. I'm about 250 pages in, and so far, like I am not enjoying it so far. And I don't know whether I should keep going or not because everybody says it's so good. And I'm like, wait, so is something gonna happen in the last 200 pages? Because it's a long book. So I'm like, do I want to dedicate 2 more hours of my life to finishing this book that I'm not enjoying so far? So I don't know. I'm kind of scared to put my review out on that and be like, I don't know what to do about Jade City. So I'm taking a pause from it and I think I might go like read something else and come back. And then for my next book, I honestly never know what my next book is because I'm very much a mood reader. So usually I'll either get a book in the mail or I'll go to the library or the bookstore and I'll see a book and I'll be like, oh, that looks good. And I'll just take it home and start reading it the same day. And that's how I pick my next book.
No, I love it. Yeah, definitely do your reviews regardless of whether you like them or not. We always, you know, it's always funny when there's that series that everybody loves, and then you have that one person that's like, I didn't like it. This is like, it's like the perfect heel turn in like anything that, like any movie or video you see. It's like, it's always funny to me. Let's get into some rapid fire questions real quick. All right. What's an important book that you don't see a lot of people talking about?
Oh, okay. This is a tough one. Um, I feel like I'm just the biggest like Kaiki fan. Like Kaiki by Vaishnavi Patel, I think is just an awesome book that is such a great exploration. I think Circe by Madeline Miller gets a lot of hype, and people don't realize that Kaiki by Vaishnavi Patel is like a very similar style of book that is so good, if not better, in my opinion. In the same kind of style of writing and about the same kind of style of like a powerful woman forgotten in history.
Perfect. What's been like your favorite page turner written by a South Asian author this year?
Ooh, this year. Okay, let me pull my list again.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I really enjoyed actually Payal Mehta's Romance Revenge Plot. I read it a while ago and I love the show Never Have I Ever on Netflix, and this gave me like all the same vibes.
Perfect. What's the best part of being a book content creator?
Ooh, the people, hands down. People are so fun.
Perfect. What is your favorite romance trope?
Ooh, oh, that's so hard. That's such a tough one. I love forced proximity because I feel like, yeah, I'll say my least favorite too. My least favorite is miscommunication. So I think forced proximity forces them to talk.
Good, good, good. What's the last book that made you cry?
Oh gosh. Probably Sorry for the Inconvenience by Farnaz Rishi.
Perfect. What is your favorite book to screen adaptation?
Oh, okay. Currently, it is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. I think they killed it on that one.
Perfect. And last, what are some South Asian authors that we should check out that may be coming up or anything in that space?
Definitely Sabaa Tahir. If you haven't read any of her books yet, All My Raid is amazing, and she has a new book coming out later this year called Air, Heir. Farah Nazarishi, who wrote a memoir, Sorry for the Inconvenience, but is also coming out with a YA romance, If You're Not the One. I'm super excited for that. I'm trying to think. I know that there's a book called Rake's Fall, which is a South Asian sci-fi that came out a couple months ago, and the cover is so beautiful. I'm blanking on the author's name right now, but it just looks so amazing, and I haven't read it yet, but I'm very excited to. Um, and then Namrata Patel also came out with a book, The Curious Secrets of Yesterday, and that also just has an awesome cover. I'm like 20th in line at the library, so hopefully I'll get it before next year. But
Yeah.
I've heard nothing but good things, and I've read all of her other books. So if you are also struggling to get your hands on her newest book, her other two books, Scent of a Garden and The Secret Life of Meena Dave, or no, The Candid Life of Meena Dave, is really, they're both phenomenal.
Perfect. We'll make sure to put them all in the show notes as well as we'll send them out so people can see the full list. The way we like to end this podcast, it's a two-sided question, but you can have two completely different answers. What would you like to see more of in the book world?
Ooh, I want to see like more collaborations in person because I think it's so fun when people get together and meet up.
I absolutely agree. And what would you like to see less of in the book world?
I feel like we like to refer to everything as drama, even when it's not drama and it's just like a fact of life or just like something that happened. Everyone's like, "Oh, here's the drama," and it's like it's not that's not drama. Like that's just how it is. So maybe less of calling everything drama.
Yeah, I agree with you, Maya. Well, thank you so much. Let us know where we can find you or anything that's coming up in your world that we can support in your world.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. Anyone watching or listening, you can find me at M&M Books on Instagram, like the candy, and I'm on TikTok at Maya Maya dot reads. But
Perfect.
yeah, this was so fun. I'm so glad you had the time to sit down and talk with me today. This was
Yeah,
so great.
I'll say thank you so much again just for your patience. So I appreciate you. Maya, thank you again and have a great rest of your day.
You too. Bye bye.